Good morning, everyone. This is the virtual town hall that will focus on risks facing small businesses, particularly as they start to reopen post COVID-19. Those risks are going to be significantly enhanced by AB5 and PAGA. And we're going to talk about what those two things are and try to give you some tips on how to avoid those risks, how to navigate those risks, as well as give you an update on the fight to repeal AB5 and PAGA so that small businesses are going to be allowed a more hospitable environment, business environment in California. I'm Carl DeMaio. I'm chairman of Reform California. I'll be talking about AB5 and PAGA, and we're joined today by a special guest, Tom Manzo, president of CABIA, the California Business Industry Alliance. They've been doing a lot of great work on both these topics on behalf of small businesses. Just a little housekeeping item. If you want to ask a question at the end of the presentation, we'll take questions then. If you're in the Zoom app, all you have to do is click raise hand and we'll call on you for your question. If you're on the phone, you can hit *9 and that raises your hand and we can bring you into the conversation. And if your question isn't answered, you can email it at the end of the session to info@reformcalifornia.org and we will get an answer back to you within 24 hours. With that, let's start out. I've known Tom Manzo for almost 10 years now, and he's a fighter. He started the California Business and Industrial Alliance after a number of small businesses got shaken down using the PAGA lawsuit approach. We'll be talking about that in a minute and been hearing from Tom. But our organizations have been collaborating on this topic for several years now. Reform California is familiar to many of you. We are the organization that helped qualify the gas tax repeal, Proposition 6, in 2018. That revolt was broad-based and bipartisan, and the politicians actually had to change the title to steal the election by taking out the words gas tax repeal on the ballot. We've defeated over $3 billion in unfair and unnecessary tax increases in the last 10 years alone. We pulled off the 5th successful recall of a state office holder in 2017 and 2018. That would be State Senator Josh Newman. But we really are a different type of organization than most in that we are not funded by big donors or big business. We are entirely supported by grassroots supporters. Over 600,000 people on our subscriber list and volunteers and supporters of about 250,000 people in California. Because of our independence, we take on fights that may ruffle feathers. We're not afraid to take on those fights. The reason why we're interested in AB5 and PAGA is that these laws literally are shakedown laws. And these shakedown laws are designed to do two things: to get money for government from small businesses and individuals unfairly, and really empower a very small group of special interests. First and foremost, what is AB5? This is a new law. It took effect January 1, 2020. And AB5 all but bans the use of independent contractors in California. It also empowers government bureaucrats to investigate and impose stiff penalties on small businesses. It is directly linked to PAGA, which we'll talk about in a minute. AB5 basically says that you may not hire an independent contractor as a small business owner. There are a few exceptions, but it's so complex that most lawyers have advised small business owners don't do it. AB5 is designed to put everybody into an employee-employer relationship. Why? Because they want to grandfather in a whole series of labor laws that are being abused right now by government unions to force people, or by union and trades, to force people into unions and to collect dues from them. AB5 has created a lot of confusion, and it codifies into state law a very bad California Supreme Court case called Dynamex. And Dynamex originally was very narrow, and it applied to only a certain relationship of independent contractors. But now the AB5 law has taken that very narrow interpretation and expanded it to ban independent contractors in California. What's been the impact since January 1 alone? Significant loss of business opportunities for independent contractors. A lot of independent contractors are being told by California small businesses that they no longer can be hired. But worse, there are websites for musicians, writers, websites for event planners, all sorts of independent contractor trades and professions are now being cut out of national contracts. That they can't bid on a contract being offered by a company in another state for independent contractor work because nobody wants to hire anyone from California because of AB5. There are fear of penalties and frivolous litigation fueled by PAGA by small business owners. And so these small businesses now have had to discontinue the use of independent contractors, which has made their business model far less efficient. It's increased costs to small businesses because now they have to actually hire an employee or assign a duty previously done by an independent contractor to full-time employees. So what's the real agenda for AB5? The state wants unemployment and unemployment insurance and other employment taxes. They want money that they can collect by making everyone an employee. By being an employee, unions can come in and organize these employees into their union, and they can be paying dues. Most importantly, it's designed to enrich lawyers. Trial lawyers are using AB5 to shake down companies to file frivolous lawsuits. And then, of course, labor law enforcement. When you're an employee, all California labor law is now subject to that relationship, whereas under an independent contractor agreement, it would be just simply contract law. We've laid out this fight from a principled standpoint. We're calling it the freedom to work. Repeal AB5 because these independent workers, these independent contractors should be given the freedom to work. Many of them are satisfied as independent contractors. They love what they do. Instead of being an event planner only 10% of the time for a company and then doing 90% of other work that you don't love, an event planner can actually become a full-time event planner for multiple companies and do what they like, full-time. They don't want to work outside their passion area. Second, flexibility. Independent contractors can work when, where, and how they want. Third, it's efficient. Makes no sense for a business, particularly a small business, to insource many of these functions when it's only needed on an on-demand or periodic basis. So what is PAGA? And we're going to hear more from Tom on this since he is the preeminent expert in California on PAGA. PAGA stands for Private Attorney General Act. It allows private attorneys to act as the de facto state attorney general in pursuing an investigation and bringing legal action against any business, small, medium, or large, for alleged violations of state labor law and regulations. Now, let me highlight the word alleged. Under PAGA, an attorney can show up and say, I believe you haven't been complying with labor law. And you ask them as a small business owner, well, what did I do? And the lawyer says, that's for me to determine. Give me your payroll file. Give me your office manual. Give me these records, and I'll come back and let you know. Stalin once said, show me the man, I'll find the crime. That's what PAGA is. It's very unfair. It's predatory, and they know it, which is why the vast majority of PAGA lawsuits actually don't go to court. They're settled outside of court, so the attorney gets a payoff. The attorney knows, just like an ADA lawsuit, that all they need to do is find one small technical violation, real or perceived, and that they can argue to the small business owner, I will bankrupt you. I will tie you up with legal expenses, drag you into court, get you under discovery with broad discovery powers under PAGA, or you can pay me $100,000 to go away. You choose. You either pay your own lawyer $150,000 and take the risk of losing, pay me $100,000 and you can save it, and we'll settle. PAGA is being used in a manner worse than any other ADA lawsuit that a small business owner has ever encountered, because it mixes the reach of a class action lawsuit with the potency of a government enforcement proceeding, labor law. What are some of the impacts of PAGA? Well, first and foremost, horrific, significant financial losses to any business that faces a PAGA lawsuit. Even a demand letter will end up costing you a lot, whether or not the lawsuit is actually filed. And no, don't say it's for the workers, not for the little guy. The workers get no benefit, okay? What the PAGA lawyers find are technical violations. You'll hear in a moment about a lawsuit filed about the temperature of a restroom. The temperature was not properly maintained in the employee restroom. I'm sure you're probably saying, is there a law governing the temperature of restrooms? Yeah, it's not a law. It's actually a regulation in the state labor code. And so if you're in violation of what the government thinks the temperature of that bathroom should be, you've just committed a PAGA violation and you got to pay up big time. So again, it's worse than the ADA lawsuits, because at least ADA, there's a theory that maybe someone with a disability was disadvantaged by a restroom that wasn't properly modified, et cetera. With PAGA, there's no real damage that they have to show. Again, the real agenda with PAGA is the same agenda with AB 5. Unionize employees, enrich the lawyers, collect money from them. The state received $42 million as a bounty on PAGA settlements and lawsuits last year alone. And it's continued at that clip. Think about that. That's only a percentage of the take from California businesses shaken down by PAGA lawsuits. The real agenda is seen in the latest change to PAGA. PAGA was amended, and it now reads that if you sign a labor contract, you're given a shield from a lot of PAGA provisions. And so, if you want to avoid PAGA, sign a labor contract and pay into the union coffers. Well, we know what's going on here. They're creating a tool, a weapon, to force people into signing union agreements. Now, COVID-19 makes all this infinitely worse. AB 5 and PAGA needed to be repealed prior to COVID. COVID is now making both of these tools worse. And if you're a small business owner thinking about reopening or in the process of reopening, or you've already reopened, you are going to likely face challenges from both AB 5 and PAGA more than any other state regulation. Even the public health inspections will pale in comparison. Why? California, the uninsurance program, EDD, the department is using COVID-19 payments to independent contractors to build a case file against your small business. Part of the PAGA, part of the AB 5 provision is a $40 million fund to launch investigations against small businesses. And one of the mechanisms they're using are any independent contractors that apply for unemployment benefits under CARES, the federal program, that for the first time in history, we believe, have provided unemployment insurance benefits to independent contractors. As part of the application process, the independent contractor needs to disclose the small businesses that they've worked for in the past 12 months, and the terms and conditions, and the nature of the work. And all that information isn't being used to approve or deny their unemployment insurance claims. That information is being collected by EDD solely to build a case file against the small businesses that should have had these people as employees all along. Chilling effect, isn't it? You have your independent contractors out there trying to get a benefit that they're legally entitled to, but the state is using that carrot in order to collect case information to bring enforcement actions against small businesses. That's the first thing that's happening with COVID. The second thing, because PAGA applies to labor standards, labor and workplace codes, regulations, and laws, we now see public health orders falling into compliance with, quote, worker safety and workplace sanitation regulations. So when your municipality or your county says you can reopen, as long as you adhere to these standards, those standards can be the basis of a PAGA lawsuit against you. The way in which you laid off your employees prior to COVID or during COVID could be used against you in a PAGA proceeding. All of this stuff has now become very relevant in a COVID environment. So, for example, if you don't allow, require, manage your employees to wear masks and to sanitize their hands, one of your other employees can say, you've exposed me by not managing these other employees properly to the possibility of getting COVID-19. Now, they don't have to get it. They don't have to suffer a loss. You are guilty under PAGA just because you did not comply with the regulation. You don't have to show a loss or the contraction of a disease or even the experience of an actual risk. You just simply have to show that the business did not comply with the COVID-19 worker safety and workplace sanitation requirements. This is a nightmare. COVID-19 plus PAGA is going to exponentially expand the use of these lawsuits to shake down small businesses. Fortunately, we're trying to fight back. And Tom Manzo of California Business Industry Alliance has been one of the leading warriors. And they currently have a lawsuit underway to try to throw PAGA out, or at least substantially weaken it. And so I want to hand it over to Tom to comment on PAGA, as well as some of his tips for how a small business can try to avoid some of these problems and what they're doing to fight it.
Well, good morning, Carl, and good morning to everybody that's watching us on Facebook. I appreciate you having me on. And it seems to me, Carl, you might be the expert now on PAGA. Seems you know quite a bit about it. You know, the biggest issue is compliance, you know, and I would say probably everybody's doing something wrong. And if you look at California's Labor Law Digest, you can see it's over 1,100 pages. And for a small business to comply with all these rules and regulations makes it very, very difficult. You know, we have some friends that own a small flower shop. You know, they have less than 10 employees. And I'm always telling them, you know, watch out for this, watch out for that, be careful. And they don't have the sophistication to have human resources department. You know, the owner is the human resources department. They're the janitor, you know, they're the delivery person. How do they keep up with all of these laws? And I've been tracking a lot of the PAGA notices that go out. If you go to our website, you can see we track them. And we have a database that lists all the attorneys that are filing these type of lawsuits. And I looked last week alone, 38 PAGA notices a day, 38 possible lawsuits a day. They're going to either end up settled or they're going to end up, some of them might go to court. I saw some of them were some big companies, but I would say 95% of these end up being settled in mediation. And a lot of these companies you know, Goodwill Industries got hit. Cedar Sinai, this is last week. They're in the healthcare industry. Hometown Buffet might not even survive after all of this is over with. Yet they're now going to have to face a private attorney general act lawsuit. In this particular lawsuit, you know, you can't get out of it. You can't file bankruptcy. It's like owing money on taxes, on income taxes. You're going to have to pay it. So, you know, I always advise everybody to do the best you can and try to be compliant. You know, start with the paycheck stub, you know, make sure that I always tell everybody, you know, don't round up or round down on time cards, you know, pay to the actual punch, make sure they're taking their lunches, you know, within 5 hours, make sure they're getting their breaks, and God forbid, make sure that the restroom is warmer than 68 degrees, you know, and a lot of people didn't believe this. And it took a few years for the lawsuit to actually happen. And it's big lots. And how are they even going to prove it? Carl, how are they going to say, yeah, the restroom was less than 68 degrees?
Wait, so people understand. In California labor code and regulations, the big book that you can order from the California Chamber of Commerce, actually, there is some sort of commentary about restrooms for employees should be maintained no cooler than 68 degrees? Is there a cap on how hot they can be, or is it just no cooler?
Well, there's an OSHA regulation that they're floating around that you can't be warmer than 82 degrees.
But not yet. Okay, so right now, if your restroom gets cooler than 68 degrees, you've just committed a PAGA violation, even though someone may not have been in the restroom at that time.
Right.
And then the question is, how do you prove that your restroom was warmer than 68 degrees?
Right.
The burden of proof is on the company, and the PAGA
what they end up
will tie you up.
doing is they'll say, okay, your restroom was less than 68 degrees. And by the way, they took late lunches, they missed their breaks, rounding up, rounding down, they didn't properly pay the bonuses. They'll throw 10, 15 different infractions they accuse you of. And the burden of proof becomes on the employer. They have to give this information, to the attorney, and then the attorney gets to just to run with it.
Right now, you could have a small business like a hairstylist or a coffee shop reopen under COVID-19. And an attorney could go in with a camera and start taking pictures, documenting how you weren't compliant with the regulations, putting your workers at risk. And that then could be utilized under California Labor Code to go after you on a PAGA lawsuit. So I really worry about COVID-19, some of these crazy regulations. Everyone realizes we got to wash our hands and, do the right thing and protect our employees and protect our customers, protect our vendors, et cetera. But it's become a gotcha game. And COVID-19 has now proliferated all the things you need to comply with, in addition to that big, thick labor law guideline.
There's a recent slew of lawsuits right now over COVID, exactly what you're saying, and they're specifically targeting every McDonald's. Anybody that's a franchise owner of McDonald's, I would say watch out, because that's what they're doing. They're saying the workers weren't properly protected. They didn't have the proper masks. They didn't have the proper hand sanitizer. They didn't have the proper social distancing. They weren't protected. And Carl, I mean, you're spot on. These lawsuits are going to just grow exponentially, because how are you going to prove that? Are you going to have to take a picture of how much hand sanitizer you have at your facility every day to say, yes, it was available?
So Tom, talk about the lawsuit that PAGA has filed to try to reverse this reach of PAGA.
Well, one thing that's important we named in our lawsuit, just so everybody can listen and understand, and we actually cited it in the lawsuit. If you somehow didn't pay your employee, say you were running QuickBooks and you accidentally underpaid them by a total of $21 over a period of 1 year. It could be a rounding issue. It could be, maybe they were shutting the store and this was the extra minute they took to leave. That $21 that you owe that employee turns into $67,000 worth of penalties and fines. So if you have 30 employees, all of a sudden you're looking at a $3.5 million lawsuit. And that's what we were trying to tell everybody with the lawsuit is you really don't have, a fair chance that they put the dollar amount so high, you'd never try to fight it in court. And your best bet is just to try to settle it as quickly as possible. And all of the attorneys know this. They all know this. And, right now, we've done some discovery with the bill, AB 1654. That is the unionized exemption, the carve-out. We're going to release some of the video of the deposition. There's a good chance our lawsuit could get that turned over. And we're still looking towards the future, potentially getting this lawsuit into the Supreme Court, where our separation of powers can be put back into the lawsuit. And if we could get separation of powers, this would make this lawsuit something that would probably be much bigger than PAGA, because obviously separation of powers, and we're seeing it really visible as of lately, is a big issue here, and legislators can't be deciding who's wearing a badge and enforcing labor laws. It's insane.
And by the way, the lawsuit that PAGA has filed against the union exemption could also, the theory behind that lawsuit and even the case law that's produced by that lawsuit could help us knock out AB 5 exemptions. Right now, the politicians are hearing from their base. Some of these liberal politicians are saying, oh, AB5 is hurting the musicians, the actors, the event planners. These are typically Democrats. I'm going to give them an exemption. Well, those exemptions may not stand up in court because the lawsuit against PAGA is all about the fundamental unfairness of providing an exemption for one class by not giving the same exemption to another class. And so there's a whole lot of opportunity here with this lawsuit, which is why we need to continue to press it. But ultimately, this is not just going to be settled in the courts. This is going to have to be settled at the ballot box. And that's why we are urging small business owners to wake up. Don't just get ready. You can do everything you possibly can to comply with labor law. And I think Tom will tell you right away that there's no way to provide yourself with 100% assurance you're not going to be shaken down from a PAGA lawsuit, because I will find a violation, a technical violation, no matter how good of a manager you are. And usually it's never your fault. That's how damaging this whole lawsuit, this whole litigation has been, is that no matter how hard a small business owner works and how genuinely committed they are to complying with the law, they will always find a violation, alleged or real, and they will be then sued and they'll have to deal with the consequences. And so the only reasonable and effective way for us to fight this, outside of the lawsuit that PAGA has going on, is to throw some of these legislators out of office and target them on the basis of their support for AB5 and their support for PAGA. And that's where Reform California comes in. PAGA can do the litigation and advocacy. Reform California can do a lot of the politics. That's the difference there. Tom's organization has its own focus and its own ability to do things under the law. Our organization, Reform California, actually has no limitation. We can go after the politicians themselves. So that's where our ability to do a recall or is more effective to target maybe 5 or 6 of these bozos and take them out of office in November. And so that's what we are looking at as one of our assignments going forward. What's important is that we get the small business community organized, because one of these days you're going to be hit by one of these lawsuits. One of these days, it's going to be so impossible to run a company in California that you're going to go out of business. And golly, if COVID-19 hasn't shown us that, I don't know what would. So with that, let me open it up to questions. Let me just remind folks how to ask a question. If you're on the Zoom app, you can click the button, raise hand, and then we'll call on you. If you're on the phone, hit *9. Always, if your question's not answered, just email it to info@reformcalifornia.org. While we're getting people ready to ask the questions to Tom and myself, there's a couple items that you can do to join the fight. Number one, share the petition that we have available right now, focusing on organizing the opposition to AB5 and by extension of that, PAGA. It's called defendfreedomtowork.org. defendfreedomtowork.org. Share that petition. If you're not on that petition, sign it, but get as many of your friends and colleagues and small business owners, fellow business people to sign that, because then they'll get a weekly update on the fight against PAGA and AB5. Organize a virtual town hall. Right now, we've got about 1,000 people on this town hall, but we need to organize other town halls for other businesses. So if you're a member of a chamber, we will bring this presentation to your chamber. What we want to do is make sure people got information to try to prevent a violation of AB5 and PAGA. And we also want them, frankly, to join the fight against them. So if you want to organize a virtual town hall for your trade group, your professional group, let us know. Tom also and I also go across the state and we speak. Once we can do events again, we speak at events. So email Jordan Gurnett and we will get someone to represent this issue in front of your group. And then, of course, please contribute anything you can to PAGA.org or reformcalifornia.org, because we're fighting these battles not with the deep pockets of government, not with the deep pockets of the labor unions. No, we've got individual business owners who are giving 25, 50 bucks, 100 bucks here and there to try to help us out. So please do that. And let's go ahead and switch over to questions. Dave McCullough, do you have someone you want me to call on?
Sure. First question comes from the Q&A. This has to do with musicians. What effect does AB5 have on 501c3 semi-professional orchestras? How do they and their musicians comply with AB5?
Well, there was a musician exemption that they're trying to pass into law. Michael Alfera is much more versed in the do's and don'ts about independent contractors, and it's a mess. There's certain exemptions for people if it's a one-time performance, but if it's an ongoing arrangement, they have to be employees. So it's a mess for musicians, which is why you can't rely on some carve-out exemption. You're going to have to really see an overall repeal of AB5.
And if I might add on that, just because the organization is a 501c3, they still have to have employees. And that's what the problem is they used to pay the musicians like, hey, we're going to do a concert and you're going to get $1,000 for this event. Based on AB5, you really can't do that anymore. And that's where the issue comes in.
Just as an example of that, the San Diego Humane Society, the ones that take care of cats and dogs, rescue animals, they were hit with a PAGA claim 2 years ago. I mean, these lawyers have no shame. They would go after Mother Teresa. All right. As long as they made a buck, they would do it. Next question.
Marianne, good. You are live. Just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi. I've been working with my attorney, my labor attorney, for the past few years, just trying to, comply with all of this. And I think I heard something earlier that I just want to circle back on. Did you say that if you round up on a timesheet to pay an employee more, is that?
No. I tell everybody, don't round, pay to the punch. You're always safe for paying to the punch, because when you have a rounding policy, even if it's an acceptable rounding policy in the labor law digest, the issue becomes is it'll be challenged. And if you are 1/10 of 1% in your favor, where the employee is getting less money because of the rounding policy, then that's a violation, and it adds up. That particular violation is one of the biggest ones.
Okay. She's more of on an hourly kind of timesheet situation. So I don't know if that would be an issue, but if I can, I just want to pick up on what somebody was writing in this thread here while you were speaking,
Sure.
Carl, and that is, has anybody ever successfully countersued one of these attorneys?
I'm not aware. No, I'm not aware of that at all. Tom, has anyone
been deputized by the state? Is that even possible?
Yes, under PAGA, they are deputized by the state to perform those functions, and the state gets a commission. They get a payoff.
Yeah, they get their cut.
So basically, since you can't sue government, you probably can't sue them.
No, it's almost impossible. And the problem is that if they find one violation, they accuse you of 7 or 10 things, and there's one thing out of place, even if your name is spelled wrong, even if you have a dot or you miss the hyphen, that's a violation. And yeah, you might have a chance to correct only that, but you only had 33 days to correct it. And usually that window and time frame is already passed. And the one thing I will say to everybody on this, our nonprofit organization got so fed up with hearing about all these lawsuits and all the small business owners that we talk to. We actually have a wage and hour audit service, which is very reasonably priced. And, I talked to Carl yesterday, and normally we donate a majority of those proceeds back to our nonprofit. And we agreed that, we would put 10% of those proceeds back into Reform California. So if anybody out there would like to just, take a look and have us, diagnose it. I mean, we look at everything. We look at the paycheck stub. We look at your handbook. We look at your time cards. It's a detailed, thorough look, because we have to prevent them. You know, if we can prevent them, that's going to at least stop the amount of lawsuits that are coming.
So that's something that you could say for us, right? Because I'm sort of feeling on this call like the money that we're paying attorneys to try to protect ourselves doesn't even matter because they're going to find something.
Yeah.
So
one of the other issues that we found is so we're trying to really do this and offer it to smaller to medium-sized businesses, because a lot of times smaller businesses, we can't afford the attorney's rates. We can't afford the prices. So because they can't afford the rates, they're not, you know, getting sometimes the advice that they need, and they're trying to do things on their own. And, you know, you can't, some of this stuff, you can't Google, you're not going to get the right answer. You're not going to get the right answer from sometimes attorneys. You know, you really got to be careful. And that's what we realized. And we said, you know what, while we're fighting it, we're going to help. We're going to make a difference on that end. And that's what our goal is for that.
And that's a way of being proactive and trying to make sure you're running it as tight as possible. And for those struggling small businesses that don't have that, you know, in-house corporate counsel, it's a great resource to take advantage of. However, it really, I want to make sure people understand, no matter how hard you work, you're probably still not compliant, and you're probably still at risk of a PAGA lawsuit. So while you need to tighten up all your practices so that you minimize the attractiveness of your company, because it's not an overt violation, the only acceptable conclusion to this fight is the repeal of PAGA.
Yeah,
it's the repeal of AB5. There's no other acceptable outcome. Those two laws must be stricken from our code, and something needs to replace them, but the laws as currently structured need to be eliminated.
Okay, our next question to go to Dory Amarillo.
Before we go to Dory, Tom, how can you get more information on the audit service? Someone asked that.
Yeah, go to CABIAHR.com, CABIAHR.com.
There you go. All right, Dory, go ahead.
Hi, Tom. Oops, I have some reverb here.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Was there any look into the legal aspect of AB5 from a human rights angle, and to attack it from a whole different angle while we're dealing with all that frustration of political system and supermajority, and they do as they wish.
All right. Thank you for that question, Dory. Dory wants to know, is there any way to legally challenge AB5? Yes, there are several lawsuits underway. The most recent court development was with the journalists. I thought it was really rich that the journalists who applauded AB5 originally, the concept of it, ended up getting hoisted in their own petard. And they ended up suing, saying, no, it should not apply to newspapers and column writers and cartoonists. And sorry, guys, you're going to have to settle for the same law as everyone else. The court ruled unfavorably against the newspaper and independent writers groups. But that's only one of many lawsuits, and that, I believe, will be appealed. There's also for AB5 an initiative that's on the ballot, just qualified last week, from Uber and Lyft to exempt app-based independent contractors. And I believe it's only for the rideshare industry, app-based rideshare. It's very narrow. It's a small parochial exemption. I wish that Uber and Lyft had done the right thing and gone after the law for everybody, because it's a concept of fundamental fairness. But we're looking at that campaign and seeing ultimately what our posture would be on that initiative, whether we go for getting that passed and moving on and then fighting AB5 as a whole, or perhaps dialoguing with Uber and Lyft and saying, look, it's either all or nothing. So stay tuned on that question. But there is an initiative on the ballot for a partial, narrow, very narrow repeal of AB5 for rideshare.
Great. Jimmy, you're on the air.
Hey,
Hey,
Jimmy.
how's it going, everybody? So 2 questions. Can the feds help in any way by cutting funding? Because sounds like, to me, it's constitutionally wrong what the state has imposed on all of the business owners or potential business owners.
So a couple things. Yes, there are opportunities for federal lawsuits, and Tom mentioned that. They do have a federal claim against PAGA. That's going to take time to get through the courts. We would love to get this to the Supreme Court and get a favorable ruling, because like Tom said, it could have a ripple effect on a number of other issues. But as it relates to withdrawing funding, there may be some administrative funding that the Trump administration could consider. Again, when Trump has tried to do that, they've faced a lawsuit, and the courts have taken their time on those issues. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a Congress that wants to tackle this issue, it's going to be hard. And just on that front, the Democrats in Congress have introduced a law similar to AB 5 nationally. So they're not done. AB 5, they want to export this madness across the country. And I haven't checked, Tom, but I would suspect they also have a law similar to PAGA.
They're doing the same thing. They're trying to get it in Oregon,
Yeah.
Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, and they disguise it and mask it with this like friendly name, the Empire Act, and how they're helping employees. And those attorneys are probably just salivating, once they can go into a different state, knowing what they've learned here.
Question from Anna on the chat box while Dave gets another question teed up. She says, she asks, for nonprofit organizations, could EDD PAGA unions appeal to try to strip them of the 501c3 status? No, I mean, they would have to be violating federal 501c3 status provisions. That's usually not the case here. A 501c3 could actually have employees, as Tom pointed out. And so if a 501c3 doesn't comply with the labor law, they are treated like any other entity, any other business. And in theory, churches could be subjected to this sort of stuff if it's a strictly labor law issue.
And they have been sued under PAGA. Churches, children's homes.
Yep.
Name it. It's like you said, they would sue Mother Teresa.
Yeah, so the 501c3 would have a legal judgment against it. They would have to then find a way to pay the legal judgment, or they'd have to find a way to pay off the attorney and settle the shakedown, the ransom. Next question. Got James Morgan?
James Morgan, you're on the air.
Go ahead, James. I think he's still muted though, Dave. There you are, James. Now you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay. My question is, boy, Lorena Gonzalez sure opened a can of worms. I don't even think she knew what she was doing. But anyway, I'm a notary public and a closing agent. What we do is out-of-state, in-state companies hire us to go walk people through their loans and close their home loans for them, right? And I'm just simply a one-person notary public, and I'm 1099 with all those guys. So basically just what I'm hearing is we have to let them know that we have to be employees, or I don't really understand, or we just keep going, because I just keep going what I'm doing, I don't care.
And that's the uncertainty created by AB 5. And there's a question from Anna that I want to add in there. She asks, as a workaround to AB 5, should an individual create an S Corp? That alone is not a shield.
No.
So AB 5 does not necessarily exempt an organization, an individual that creates a corporation, an S Corp or a C Corp. It is based upon the actual transaction and the relationship between the small business or the business and the individual. In essence, you run the risk. It's that much of a mess that they've created. And so government can come along and say, no, you were supposed to do an employment arrangement. It should have been an hourly employment arrangement between you and this individual. Or a PAGA attorney, more likely, will come after you saying, I'm going to argue that it should have been compliant with AB 5. You didn't make this person an employee. That's a violation of labor law. I'm going after you. That's more likely what you're going to face. So the answer is there's no bright line test that you can examine under AB5 as it's currently written.
But does this deal with the out-of-state corporations too, like the title companies, escrow companies and things? How does that affect them?
They would be non-compliant and they would be subject to a lawsuit. And that's why we have found that many of the independent contractors who are trying to apply and bid on work on contract sites and job posting sites, work project posting sites, really, they've been told under many of these solicitations for bids, if you are a resident or are based in California, you need not submit a bid because they don't want to deal with AB5. And so all those great workers, all those great talented professionals are basically cut out of a national economy for their trade or their profession.
Oh boy, yeah. Well, I'm fourth generation Californian, and I'm a very sad person watching what has happened to this state in my lifetime. So thank you very much, boy. We're all with you, and I sure appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. We got time for 3 more.
Got another one in the chat box.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm a small business owner of a translation business, and one of my independent contractors filed for unemployment. What do I need to protect myself to continue my business hiring independent contractors? What do I need to do?
Talk to a lawyer. You know, that information that they're going to collect at the EDD relates to what they did for you prior to today. So they'll go back a year and ask about, you know, work they did for your company, for other companies. They'll ask about the terms and conditions, how the work was provided, and the independent contractor has to fill out all this information. And I've heard from independent contractors who are terrified. They say, I love my clients. I don't want to get them in trouble, but I also need the unemployment benefit to survive. What do I do? And that's the position that Gavin Newsom and EDD has put them in. It is so predatory what they've done here. So what I would suggest is that you consult an attorney as to what you should be doing going forward. But as of right now, whatever has happened up to this point, you may have exposure.
Hi, Denise, you are on.
Hi, Denise, go ahead. She's still muted. There you go, Denise, go ahead. Denise Duncan, are you there?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Go ahead, ask your question.
Can you, I'm so sorry. Multitasking. My question is, you know what? I forgot what it was. Actually, I've been
That's
waiting.
Okay. All right.
So I'm sorry. I'll let you guys move on. I'm so sorry.
I got Ernest Gargas says, for those contractors, workers, can contractors or workers sue the state over their right to work, the limitation on their income and the limitation on their ability to provide for families? Yes, that is one of the causes of action in some of these suits against the state on AB5. Whether courts agree with that is, you know, to be seen.
Some of them have already gotten thrown out, haven't they, Carl?
Yeah.
There was several in there. I think the trucking association is still standing.
Trucking association is still standing. Yep. Yep. Because most of those truckers are independent truckers, devastated in a whole sector of the economy. Why? Because Lorena Gonzalez wants to have union trucking. She only wants union firms. She wants the dues. Why? Because those dues in part go to reelect her to her position in politics. It's nothing about, it has nothing to do with worker freedom, worker protection, not at all. No, she is just out for a buck. She wants campaign contributions. That's what this is about. One last question.
Greg Conlon.
Greg Conlon, how you doing, sir?
Good. I just wondered about the, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
What about all the barber shops and beauty parlors? Most of those people in there are independent contractors. Are they going through an association to fight this? Or is it really apply to them?
It applies to them. Barbershops, the argument that they're making under AB5 is that they should be employees of the shop.
Because that'll shut them down. They don't want to pay the employees a fixed salary.
And more importantly, as soon as they're employees of the shop, they're subject to PAGA. So you see how these two things work hand in glove. AB5 and PAGA are literally the yin and the yang of one overall strategy, which is to shake down businesses and to force people into the unions.
Well, PAGA doesn't apply unless they're employees?
Correct. PAGA, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, PAGA would not apply to an independent contractor vendor relationship with the firm.
Yeah, it would be really difficult. You know, it would have to be the real long way around for it to even get close to applying. But yeah, you're correct.
Has the associations tried to fix it for the barbers and the beauticians?
Everyone's trying to fix it, but these politicians are unwilling to pointing out the lack of logic here is not the problem. The problem is politics. They are in bed with the labor unions and want to use AB5 and PAGA as a weapon to force people into unions. And both of these statutes have a financial payoff to the state of California. PAGA, they get $42 million a year. And with AB5, they're going to get the unemployment insurance and payroll taxes, as well as enhance their ability to get PAGA settlements.
Well, did the Lyft and the Uber drivers both get exempt?
No, they would be exempt if a ballot measure passes in November.
So they have their own ballot measure?
Yes, they have their own ballot measure, and they decided not to be charitable with the rest of us by making it a global exemption. They did a very narrow exemption for themselves. So we're looking at that initiative to find out kind of how we deal with it. Do we accept the fact that half a loaf or even like a 20th of a loaf is better than no loaf? Or do we say it's not acceptable and we need to have an all or nothing solution? I actually think that where this is headed is either a repeal process through the legislature by throwing a couple of these politicians out, or maybe we gear up for a ballot initiative in California that deals with PAGA and AB5 and some other items simultaneously. I think that may be where we're headed.
We could do the barbers and beauticians alone, just like the Lyft and Uber?
No, we would do everybody. No, don't pick and choose winners and losers.
Right.
No, it's a fundamental fairness that people should be treated fairly and that we should not make it impossible for them to earn a livelihood.
Carl, I have to say, that's so spot on. And that's the problem. That's how the Labor Law Digest got so big, is because too many people are picking and choosing. They're getting these little exemptions, and it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. And I agree with Carl. Carl's absolutely right. We have to make changes with our legislators. People like Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher have to go. Yeah.
You start with kicking some of the legislators out, and if they don't then see the light, then you have to cram it down their throat with an initiative. So, all right, if you have additional questions, we do want to answer them. So email them to info@reformcalifornia.org. But also please sign the petition, defendfreedomtowork.org, defendfreedomtowork.org. And let me make sure that that's right, because if it's .com, I'm in trouble. Defendfreedomtowork.com actually is the right web address, defendfreedomtowork.com. And please check out that audit program that CABIA has, CABIAHR.org. Go to CABIA.org to join their organization, or reformcalifornia.org to support our work. We will be posting this entire presentation on YouTube, on Facebook, as well as on the Reform California website. But if you're interested in having us come to your area, please contact Jordan Gurnett at jordan@capitalmedia.co. Thank you so much. And this concludes our webinar. Thank you, Tom Manzo.
Thanks, Carl.